Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be discussing these 5 chapters, which is volume, area, logs, indices, and functions. So we're going to be using an exam question to demonstrate these chapters. And like most living set questions on a high level, they usually involve more than one chapter in the same question. So it's something that you can't get away with. You have to kind of know a lot of the chapters to answer a certain question. Discussing the 2021 Maths Paper 1 Higher Level Question 3, it kind of covers those 5 chapters to some level. So the first part of the question, you have the diagram shows a cuboid with dimensions x, y, z centimeters. The areas in centimeters squared of the 3 faces are shown. So find the volume of the cuboid in the form of a root b, which is the set form, where a and b are natural numbers. So, like any living set higher level maths question, you should first strategize your solution before you write it down. So in your head, you should kind of map how you're going to do it, and then you do it. So to do the mapping, first you want to look at what are you given. So you want to look at what you're given and say to yourself in words that you understand yourself. So what are you given, and then from what you're given, how do you turn that into the thing they want? So in this case, what are you given? You are given the areas of each face, right? So what is area in maths? Length times width. So you're given the lengths and the widths of each of the faces, right? And then what do you want? You want the volume. So volume is length times width times height. So in this case, x times y times z. So from that, it means that you want to know what's x, what's y, what's z. When you know what they are, just multiply them together and you get the volume. So that's kind of like the general mapping of the question. So your goal is to find x, y, z and multiply them to get the area, to get the volume. Right, so that's the goal. And then we have to find x, y, z. So we know that each of the areas is given to us, the 2 root 2, the 8 root 6, the 4 root 3, they're given. And we know that in maths, those are length times width. So they're equations. So we can take each face, like for example, the first face, which is xz face. So it has a length of x and a width of z. So the first face, and we know that's equal to 2 root 2. So we can write it in equation form, as shown there. And then we can rewrite that equation in terms of just isolating one of the letters. In this case, let's isolate x. So we write x equals something. So in this case, we divide both sides by z. We end up with x equals 2 root 2 over z. So that's equation 1. We can do the same for the other faces. For example, the 4 root 3 face, that one. So that face, it has dimensions x, y. So x, the length, and y, the width. And they should equal to 4 root 3 when you multiply them together. So, because we already know what x is in terms of z, we can eliminate the x there. So we can get rid of the x, where we are saying xy equals 4 root 3. Instead of saying that, we can say 2 root 2 over z, y equals 4 root 3. So again, we're eliminating x from that equation. So you end up with that equation, and then you can rewrite that equation again in terms of y. So what is y? So if you move everything to one side, you end up with y is equal to the square root of 6z. Again, you can take the other face, the last face, which is the 8 root 6 face, that one. So you can take it and say yz equals 8 root 6. So again, you can eliminate the y because now you have an equation for y. So you can eliminate the y in that equation, and then because you know that y is equal to root 6z, which we just found, you can put that in where it says yz. So you can put the y as root 6z. So you end up with root 6z times z equals 8 root 6. If you multiply that out, you end up with z squared root 6 equals 8 root 6. And then you divide both sides by root 6. you end up with 8 root 6 over root 6 on the bottom there, which is equal to 8. But we don't want the z squared, we want z. So you get the square root of both sides to get rid of the squared on z. So you end up with z equals 2 root 2. So now we know the actual size of z. It's 2 root 2. And then now we just work backwards in our equations. So going up to find the other letters, to find the y and the x. They're easier to find because they are already in terms of z. So we just have to substitute that z value we just got to get the y value and then to get the x value. So starting with the y, we know that y 2 root 2 over zy is equal to 4 root 3. So we can substitute the z that we just found, the 2 root 2. So you end up with 2 root 2 over 2 root 2y equals 4 root 3. So 2 root 2 over 2 root 2 is just 1. So y is just 4 root 3, as you see there. So when you get the value of y, you can do the same for z. We know that, sorry, for x. We know that x is equal to 2 root 2 over z. So we just substitute the z value there. The z value is 2 root 2. So you end up with x equals 2 root 2 over 2 root 2, which is just 1. So x equals 1. So now you have the values for x, the value for y, the value for z. So you can go back to the top where you were saying you want to get x, y, z, and you want to multiply them to get the length, the width, the height. You want to multiply that to get the volume. So you just do that. xy volume equals x, y, z. So volume equals 1 times 4 root 3 times 2 root 2, which is 8 root 6. And don't forget to put the units, centimeter cube. So that's part 1 done. Move on to the second part of the question. The second part of the question, they're giving you a function. So this is where the function comes into play. The first part of the question was volume. So it was about volume and algebra. The second part, it's functions. So a totally different thing, but they're all in the same question. So part B is saying, given that f of x equals 3x squared plus 8x minus 35, where x is a real number, find the two roots of f of x equals 0. Okay, so what does that mean in English? So it means that they are saying that function f of x, which is 3x squared plus 8x minus 35, let it equal to 0. So they're saying f of x equals 0. So let it equal to 0 and find the roots. So roots is another way to say solve it or find x. Find the two values of x that satisfy that. Why two values? Because it's a quadratic. How do you know it's a quadratic? Because it is an x squared. The highest power of x is 2. So it's x squared, so it's a quadratic. So because it's a quadratic, you should use the quadratic formula. So the popular formula that says x, to solve for x, equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That formula, that popular equation, which is found in the log tables. So what is a, b, and c? Some people get confused. They just read them in order, which usually they are in order. Like for example, in this case, a is 3, b is 8, c is minus 35. But they're not always in order, so you have to be careful. So you have to know that a is the number behind the x squared term. So it doesn't matter whether the x squared term comes first. So a is always the number behind the x squared term. In this case, it's 3. B is the number behind the x. In this case, it's 8. And then c is the number without any x, or x squared. In this case, it's minus 35. Right, so if we do that, so you write your a, your b, your c, and then you put them into the equation. So when you do that, you end up with minus 8 for minus b plus or minus square root of b squared. So make sure you put the letters in brackets always, especially when you have negative numbers, because some of the calculators, such as the Casio, would give you errors or wrong answers if you don't put the brackets before you square the number. So you end up with minus 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 8 squared minus 4. A is 3 and c is minus 35. All over on the bottom we have 2 and a is 3. So you end up with these two answers, x equals minus 5 and x equals 7 over 3. And those will be your roots. Those will be the answers, the solutions to that. I guess the key word here is to know that roots are the same as solve for this. So you could get vexed by saying, okay, what are the roots? So roots is just the same way of saying solve. And then just a quick example there to demonstrate, to make sure you won't make errors when the equation is given maybe in a different way, where it's given as 3x minus 29 plus 4x squared. So in that case, what would be your A, B, C that goes in the B formula? You can put those in the comments and compare them with other people that would have commented as well to see how you did, if you got similar answers. So the last part of the question, it has to do with logs and indices. It's connected to the previous part because it's saying part 2 is saying hence or otherwise solve the equation 3 to the power of 2m plus 1 equals 35 minus 8 times 3 to the power of m. Give your answer in the form of m equals log 3p minus q, where p and q are natural numbers. So when it says hence, usually they're saying from what you just did before, use that knowledge to solve the next question. So it's a hint that is telling you that you know what you just did there, use it to do this part. Right, so this part is to do with logs and indices, but they're connected with functions. So it's a good question to study different chapters. So what do we have? The hence part, what did you just get? We know that this equation, 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 equals 0. The solutions to that is that x equals minus 5 and x equals 7 over 3. So that's what we got from the last question. So we write that up. That's the hence part. So what does that have to do with the other question? So that's where you have to be creative. You have to think about. That's where the question is. What does that have to do with the 3 to the power of 2m plus 1, etc.? So we write that on the bottom there, and we see that there's some familiarity there, right? We have 3 to the power of something, we have a 35, we have an 8. They're just written in a different order, but they look similar. So let's try to make them look more similar. Like let's make the ordering at least the same, right? If we do that, we can rewrite that, putting everything to one side. We end up with 3 to the power of 2m plus 1 plus 8 to the times 3 to the power of m minus 35 equals 0. So now it looks more similar to the function that we're given, the 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 equals 0. So now we can write that on the bottom, and then we can try to match things up. So if you look closely, like if you hunt down the x bit, you can see that the x and the 3 to the power of m are corresponding. So let's use that. So let's let x is equal to 3 to the power of m. So if you do that, and if you take the odd function, okay, if you take the function, you can if you take this function, the 3 to the power of 2m plus 1 plus 8 to the power of 8 times 3 to the power of m minus 35 equals 0, and you try to rewrite that, but substituting x equals 3 to the power of m. Let's try to do that. So we can write that as the 3 to the power of 2m plus 1. You can split those. So this is laws of indices. So this is the indices part. So laws of indices tells you that if you have something that has a power where there's numbers adding each other, okay, you can separate them by just having 3 to the power of the first power times 3 to the power of the second power. So in this case, we can write this as 3 to the power of 2m and then 3 to the power of 1. So that's the first thing we rewrite there, and then the rest will remain the same. And then the second thing we can rewrite is that another law of indices is that if you have powers multiplying each other, like 3 to the power of 2m, 2m means 2 times m, you can rewrite that as, you can put the other power outside the bracket. So for example, in this case where you have 3 to the power of 2m, you can write 3 to the power of m squared. So it's the same as saying 3 to the power of 2m. So you can put the 2 outside the bracket. You could have put the m outside the bracket, but in this case we want the 2 outside the bracket because we want to make it similar to the other equation, the 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 equals 0. So we want to get the squared bit. So we now have the squared bit. So now it looks more familiar to the original function, to that function. So we know that 3 to the power of m is x. So that's the same as saying, instead of saying 3 to the power of m squared, we can say 3 to the power of m squared times 3. So we can, instead of saying that, we can say 3x squared. And instead of saying 8 times 3 to the power of m, because 3 to the power of m is the same as x, we can say 8x. And then the 35 remains minus 35. So we already know that that equation will give us the solutions x equals minus 5 and x equals 7 over 3. So because x and 3 to the power of m are the same thing as we said at the top there, where we said let x equal 3 to the power of m, so we can then confidently say 3 to the power of m is equal to minus 5 and 3 to the power of m is equal to 7 over 3, right? So we solved for the 3 to the power of m. Remember, the goal is to solve for m. If you look at the question, they want m. Right. So another law of indices is that no matter what you put something to the power of, whether it's 0 or to the power of a negative number, you can never get a negative answer. So the moment you put something to the power of something, it doesn't matter the something, the answer is going to be positive. So from that, we can confidently cancel out or rule out the 3 to the power of m equals minus 5 solution. We can get rid of that, right? Because it's giving us a negative answer, minus 5. So, which leaves us with the 3 to the power of m equals 7 over 3 as a solution. So now the goal is, we want to turn this into logs. As you can see there, they want the answer in terms of m equals log 3p minus q. So they want the answer in logs. So that's the goal. So our goal here is to turn the indices that we have, the 3m equals 7 over 3, to logs. So that's the goal. Again, when you're doing living set questions, it's always good to keep reading back the question, doing your solution, keep reading back the question, because, and especially at the end, when you think you have the answer, read back the question. Usually they want it in another form, in a different form. Maybe you don't have that form yet and you think you're done, or they want 2 decimal places. Maybe you're putting your answer in 4 decimal places and you leave. You lose marks for that. So make sure you just read the question again. So in this case, they want the answer in logs, right? So we have to do that. Okay, so just going on tangent a bit, talking about how to turn indices to logs. So the general format of indices is a to the power of b equals c. Like 2 squared equals 4, 2 to the power of 2 equals 4. That's an indices. But that has its equivalent in logs. So that can be written, so 2 to the power of 2 equals 4 can be written in logs. So they'll mean the same thing, but different format, right? So how do you do that? How do you turn the indices to logs? So what you do is you label the numbers in order. So the A, B, C, you label them 1, 3, 2, right? Like this. So the A, the first number becomes 1, the B, the second number becomes 3, and the C becomes 2. So when you have that, the logs, the way the logs look like, log is like log base something of something equals something. So as you see here on the right. So how do we rewrite the indices to logs? We take log, the first number we put in is the one we labeled 1, which is A. The second number we put in is the one we labeled 2, which is C in this case. And then equals, the last number that we put in is the number we labeled 3, which in this case is B. So we put the B in. So you end up with log AC equals B. That's how you turn the logs into indices. So we have to do the same for our solution, for our question. So our question, we have 3 to the power of m equals 7 over 3. So again, we label them 1, 3, 2. So when we turn them to logs, it will be log the first number is 3, the second number should be 7 over 3, and then the last number should be m. So log 3, 7 over 3 equals m. So we turn them into log, but again, we still are not there yet on the solution. If you look back on the question, they want it in terms of log 3p minus q. We don't have the minus q yet. So we have to do another simplification again, right? So here are two laws of logs that we can use. So pretty easy laws. The first law, it's saying log a c over d. So if you have a log with a fraction, this is how you can turn it into a linear thing without a fraction. So you have log a, and then you put the top number there. So it'll be log AC minus, why minus? Because it's being divided. So in logs, the equivalent of division in logs is subtraction. So when you have log AC minus log AD. So that's how you do it. If that was multiplication, so that's another law that I didn't write down here. But if it was log ACD, so C times D, if you're to write it down in the linear form, it would be log AC plus log AD. So because they're multiplying, it would be a plus. Here they're dividing C over D, it's a minus. So it's log AC minus log AD. Okay. And another law, if the little number and the big number are the same, your answer is always 1. So if you have log AA, your answer is 1. It doesn't matter what the A is. So if you have log 10, 10, the answer is 1. Log 100, 100, the answer is 1. Right? So we're going to use those laws here to kind of rearrange that so that we can have the form they want. At this stage, you probably have 80% of the marks for the question, for this part of the question. But just to get that 20%, you still have to rewrite it in the form they want. So if we have the log 3, 7 over 3 equals m. Let's rewrite that. We end up with log 3, 7 minus log 3, 3 equals m. And then the last step is just to get the log 3, 3 into a number, because they want it to be q. They don't want it to be a log. So log 3, 3 is a number because the 3, 3 is equal to 1. So you end up with log 3, 7 minus 1 equals m, which is exactly the format they wanted you to have. And that's the end of the question. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share with your class so that we can we have more comments and see what other kind of problems other people are facing, and then we can make videos on those kind of problems. Very much.